Chapter 8, Hybrid Organizations. This chapter is all about various organization structures and why do they exist and how reorgs happen and why do they happen in the company. So let's get into it. So a hierarchical organization structure looks like this. This is like the military where there is a chain of command. Information usually only flows through from top to bottom, and where there's a huge sense of hierarchy. So that's very much outdated currently, except for very few organizations. Then there's this flatter organization where the information flow happens much more freely and the layers are much lower compared to the hierarchical organization. And then to the extreme, there is this flat organization. As you can see, information flows as freely as possible. There's no sense of hierarchy in any sense. And finally, a few years back, Zappos had this new um, structure called holacratic organization, right? Where there is a set of points that every employee gets, and then you get to choose where you want to spend your points in the blue circle, green circle. And if you use those points, and if those people in those circle wants you in that points, then you can work in that circle. But if you don't get to work in any of these circles, then you go to the beach. And if you don't get picked up in those 2 weeks at the beach, beach is a circle as well, which is disjointed, then you just get fired, right? So it's basically as per need, but there's no bosses in between here. So that's an extreme experiment, which I don't think is actually going to be successful. There is a lot of leverage that the bosses have, and that's what this whole book is about: high output management. It's actually emphasizing that managers could have high output that they can drive, right? So let's ignore this one. And then there's this mixture of flat and flatter hierarchy. It's called flatarchies, right? Where there's a flat team and there's also some level of management, and the work gets done. Typically, this gets done when this kind of hierarchical structures emerges when there's more innovation centers that need to be spun off, more resources, teams need to be built based on business demands that are changing much more faster. So those are the hierarchical, structures. But it comes down to three different ones. It's centralized, decentralized, and hybrid. So let's get into it. Centralized is where you have a specific division, let's say engineering, marketing, sales, or services, right? And then there's this specific focus, like, hey, you're going to focus on marketing. And all of the people under marketing are under this functional organization. In the book, the centralized model is called a functional organization, where you are really good at that function. And all of the people doing marketing, they report into this one person. Decentralized is where a marketing division might have its own sales set of people, services set of people. Similarly, sales division, majority of these marketing people would be doing marketing, but they also have sales and services. It's actually, you see that salespeople don't just belong to the sales org, but they also have some embedded sales people that report to the marketing leader. Similarly, for the sales leader, they have folks, not just all of the salespeople, most of the salespeople, but also some of the marketing people, services people. And you can think of this as a general manager concept, where in this division, like this sales division, is actually responsible for all of the sales for that division's profit and loss, right? So P&L central. So that's decentralized. And then there's this hybrid, which is the combination, where you might have two bosses. We will go into the next chapter, dual reporting, in much more detail. But hybrid is where you have marketing as a division. This is a leader for marketing. But there's also mission-oriented teams like electronic division, who just focus on electronics, home goods, and certain new business needs that come up. So there could be a team member who reports to the marketing head, but also reports to the electronic division. So there's dual reporting. And this is a combination where you have a functional focus on marketing, but at the same time you have horizontal or mission-oriented works that are needed based on business needs, right? So all of this does happen. These kind of structures, there's no one good story as to what is good for you. So my biggest learning is I try to break it down into pluses and minuses. So for a decentralized team where you have everything embedded, right? It's very agile, focused, and fast, right? You have everything that you need. You can make quick decisions, and the flexibility of resources is very high. Let's say you have a quality person embedded in the engineering team. You can move them if they have the skill sets to move to engineering when there's an engineering bottleneck, and vice versa. If there's more quality backlog, then you move from engineers to engineering to quality. So the flexibility of a decentralized team is much higher. There's quick decisions being taken, and people don't necessarily have a lot of. There's no negotiation as much in terms of moving people around because it's embedded. Folks are responsible. They make quick decisions. You can cater to custom audience, but also this can be very costly, as we saw. If this team has like sales folks embedded in marketing, now all of a sudden you have, these folks are not in touch with all of these people who are the majority doing sales work, and so they might lose some leverage. So it could be very costly to embed and have a full force team because you might not even utilize them fully, right? If you have a very, let's say, a CPU intense job, you want to use the CPU fully. Similarly, if you have a very high compute infrastructure built for your organization, but you don't use it, then it's wasted, right? Similarly, so decentralization in some sense provides generalization. So you're not really good at a thing. You're like jack of all because you're moving people around and all of that. There's independence, meaning you can actually cater to the business needs much faster. Um, the opposite is true. So the three pluses of the decentralized are the three minuses in the centralization. But at the same time, it gives you functional mastery. You can actually have sales folks actually do sales so good, and there's leverage built and all of that. Um, so cost-wise, it could be effective, but at the same time, it takes forever to respond to business needs. Let's say there's a new demand. Now, all of a sudden, you have to negotiate across various functions saying, hey, I like to move these people or move these headcounts or not have these many people for sales, but focus on marketing. Not many as means marketing, but move to engineering. So all that's very high negotiation base, and it's very slow to respond. It's very rigid in some sense. So the solution is neither decentralized nor centralized, and there's going to be movement from centralized to decentralized as engine leaders. You'll probably have and settle at some point to a hybrid solution where you have best of both. There'll be some parts that you want to keep centralized and some parts that you want to have decentralized. And when you do that effectively, you maximize on cost, you maximize on many different variables, right? So all large organizations, when I say large, it's like hundreds of engineers or thousands of total employees. They usually end up in a hybrid structure, which is a combination of some centralized and some decentralized, but majority decentralized. Um, and in case of Intel, it was majority centralized, and a few, three or four that were decentralized, right? Basically, company growing and business demand needs are the key factors, and the organization can shift. That's the key thing to remember. And on what basis do we decide whether to keep centralized, decentralized, hybrid? So these are the 7 factors that came to my mind, and these are the reasons why reorgs actually take place. Reorganization is basically saying, hey, something is not going well. Let's refocus, right? And organizational structures are actually there to um, help fix one of these areas. If you feel that there is lack of resource utilization in one team versus the other, then the organization is not balanced, is not actually serving the business need as effectively. There could be a lot of conflicts in, if you have a functional centralized organization on negotiations and understanding why this is important business need versus that's important business need. So if conflicts don't get resolved quickly, if the utilization of resources overall doesn't make sense from a gut feel standpoint, and you're not able to respond quickly to business needs, like let's say there's a competitive threat, and you want to build and launch a product very quickly, you got to be able to mobilize your resources. A lot of this reorganization also depends on org structure and org leaders, right? So you might have seen that a lot of reorgs typically take place when there is a change in leader. Every leader has a different aptitude and a different maturity on what kind of org structure they prefer. And so typically it should be initiated by the leaders who get into the role, and then based on that aptitude and based on the needs of the business, they would typically do the reorgs, right? So now we know why reorgs takes place, right? If there's a gap in decision making or innovations not happening, the business needs are not being met, collaboration is just stuck in circles, and communication is not happening, right? Then you know that the organization is not set up for success. At the same time, employee experience is also important, right? Like if you have a very flat organization, you probably realize that everything is in a complete chaos, right? And then maybe if you evolve into that, then maybe not. So also keeping our team members accountable is an important area that we'll cover in the next few videos in this and the part of the topics for this book. But these are the 7 reasons: resource utilization, conflict resolution, business needs responsiveness, aptitude for the leaders, preferences, decision making and innovation being stalled, collaboration being hurt, communication being impacted. Like if you, as a leader, you see that folks are not talking. Employee experience is pretty bad because the employee voice survey tells you that, hey, there's pretty bad accountability of how work gets clearly defined, how we keep people accountable, what are the basis for people being hired and fired. So a lot of these reasons fall into the leader's lap in terms of deciding whether they should keep centralized, decentralized, hybrid, or go through various of these architectures that we've gone through. There's a whole host of articles that you can read to understand like what are the pros and cons. But as I said, typically a mature organization falls somewhere in the hybrid structure where it provides good accountability, good resource utilization, good movement and flexibility to business needs, and keeps the organization resilient over time. And in summary of this chapter, good management rests on the reconciliation of various org structures like centralized, decentralized, hybrid, flat. If you can respond to all of these 7 needs, then you're doing your job well. So that is why org structure exists. Different types of org structure we covered. We also covered reasons for reorgs as to why they happen. And if you want to learn more, there's definitely read this book in a lot of detail. The chapter covers a lot, but there's also a 5-part simple blog post series on Forbes that you can check out where I got some of these images from. Thank you.